Did you get the, yeah, there you go.
Hi,
Welcome, Councilor Lydia Edwards. It's great to see you.
it's good to see you. I hope everyone is healthy. I hope your family members are healthy, and I just uh, I just have some updates on where we are. I heard a lot of in terms of the COVID numbers and stuff, and I won't repeat what the mayor already said about the neighborhood. So I'll just go through some other updates as well as some things we're working on in the city council. Um, so just right in the neighborhood, the RFP for Foster Street Park has gone out. That's the park that's paved over where people are parking basically on it, on Foster Street, and so it's basically cracked and it's a mess. And so we got that in the budget to make sure that that was going to be repaved and properly. Will continue to be a parking space, but it needed to be taken care of. So that's gone out. I'd hoped to just have it done, but apparently the cost was a little more than the just city budget normally allows for. So because it's over, I think it's over $50,000, it has to legally go out as an RFP. But we're working on that, and that'll get done. I think the mayor mentioned the parking in the garage with 300 spots. I'm very happy that we have that. And folks who are still looking to get in there, please feel free to contact the office. We'll do our best and make sure that you get the permits and the needs to get in the parking. I did, and I'm still thinking that Sergeant Wharf, that parking lot, should be an option as well for the neighborhood because it's in the neighborhood, it's city owned. And so for some people who may find it physically difficult to get over to government center parking, I want to make sure that those folks have a local option. I'm very excited about meeting Captain Chicolo. He's our new A1 officer who is replacing Captain Fong. I'm actually having a coffee hour this Friday at 10 at Cafe Della Sport, and I've invited the captain to come join me. Hope he can come through so we can all meet him together and talk to him about his new role in being the captain for A1. So that would be the North End in Charlestown. I want to say thank you to all the graduates and congratulations again to the folks who graduated this year in 2020. It was my honor to be, and I think one of the first car commencement ceremonies. We went through the North End and raised our car horns and beeped at everybody. And it just speaks honestly to the beauty of this neighborhood and how tight-knit we are, and celebrating what we can, how we can, even in the pandemic. I really enjoyed it. It was pretty emotional to hand out the certificates. I'm sorry to the graduates that this is the time and moment in which they're graduating, but they should know this community was so proud of them, and to see them go from college or go to high school on to college, we're just again very proud of you and all that you've accomplished. In terms of on to some of the, so Airbnb, I know that's still a big deal. We're encouraging people to still file your complaints. We had a great budget hearing about that. The city has invested additional resources in making sure there's enforcement officers. So please call us. There should be at this point an online way for you to file your complaints for any Airbnbs in the neighborhood. And if you have any trouble with that, please contact the office. Our goal is to make sure, again, especially in this time, especially due to COVID, we are not creating a mini hotel that is not regulated in our neighborhood, does not have isn't meeting the sanitary code, and is furthering our housing crisis. The couple other things, I am interested in the continued conversation about the restaurants. I've had a restaurant and the on-street parking. We've had several people reach out to us and concerns about it, really not wanting it ever to happen again. But I would say a majority of the people who've talked to us have said there might be a place for this to be something that happens 2 nights a week in the summer or something. So I just want to be clear. I have no opinion necessarily about whether this has to happen or not. I just want it to be a community process. I want it to be open and transparent. And I want the people who are directly impacted by this on their daily lives to lead in that conversation. There are a lot of people who love it and say it's the greatest thing, and then go home to their other neighborhoods, right? And so that's not to say that they don't have a voice, but it is to say that they don't live with the good or the bad of it. So I just want to make sure that people understand that's a conversation we should continue to happen. Moving on to some policies, and I saw some of the questions flash. Just wanted to let some folks know what I have been working on as a city councilor. The mayor mentioned the budget. I did vote for the budget for many, many reasons, not only with jobs that I felt were on the line, and I didn't feel in the middle of a pandemic I should be negotiating about how much money we are or are not getting, but I also felt other things that were on the line, our voucher program, for example, that the city is creating. Now we're in the middle of a housing crisis. My district has the #1 rental applications for assistance for people to stay in their homes. And I didn't want to be negotiating what the budget looked like when I saw money on the table to help people with vouchers right now. Same with food. My district also is #1. District 1 is #1 for food site needs. And again, that money needed to get to those local nonprofits, and they needed to get that food out there. And there are times and place to negotiate, and there's times and place to move and power, and we certainly did, to make sure that our district got what we needed. But there's a bigger picture. And also, honestly, I've produced or am leading on a charter amendment to make sure that when it comes to the budgetary powers in the city of Boston, that we can fundamentally change them. That charter amendment I'm proposing, we will have a hearing on that, because I think in long term, that is a real conversation I'd like the city council to have on par or close to as equal budgetary powers as the mayor, being able to propose the budget, being able to line item veto in the budget, and being able to allocate or reallocate certain funds within the budget. I think that brings us and makes us a 20th century modern, a 21st century modern city. I think that truly allows for the voters to have a voice, because you pick us every 2 years, the city council. And the best thing about this is, if you agree with me, you can vote for that in November 2021. And if you disagree with me, you can vote against it. At the end of the day, my goal is to make sure that the voters of Boston will be in control of who controls your money. That's the goal. And that's why it's a budget amendment. It's not just an ordinance to be passed and sent up to the State House. I want you, the voters of Boston, and I will do the work. I will do the door knocking. I will do what it takes to get to you. And hopefully you will be convinced that we should be having a different budgetary process. But that's the long-term vision I had. And I didn't feel like a short-term moment on an up or down vote was fair to hold that hostage. On a couple amendments I am doing on housing, I have been leading the way on a zoning amendment that is, the mayor's come out in support of it. This zoning amendment would absolutely assure that when we go to analyze big projects and small projects in the BPDA, we're not only looking at the environment, we're not only looking at traffic, but we're looking at equity and the impact on people in the area. Who's the project for? Can families actually live in there? Can they afford to be there? Are we looking at all the different ways in which this project helps or hurts our history as a city with segregation? And we do have one. So this is saying to the city planners, you have a job to do. It is not just to check a box list to say that this works or doesn't work, and this helps or doesn't help a developer make money. Your job is to see that this is a healthy, cohesive project that helps our city heal. And I believe that's a standard that the city planner should be holding developers to. And when you don't ask those questions, when you don't demand of developers, when you let them lead and tell the city what's best for them, you get the seaport. And I am concerned about that mentality. And I've been very open about that. I believe we should be designing, pushing, and moving neighborhoods. And that at the end of the day, the bottom lines of a developer should not oversee or replace the bottom line, the moral compass of our city. And that's what I believe planners should be doing. They should have that vision. And we did in the Imagine Boston 2030. We talked about race, we talked about equity, we talked about those things, but we don't plan for it. We hope it happens. And so I'm very happy that the mayor has agreed to the overall amendment, and we're still drafting it right now in partnership with the BPDA to make sure that this happens. The other amendment is actually, I would call it a home rule petition, and that's to change the Zoning Board of Appeals. That we are working on currently right now. That is right now the Zoning Board of Appeals has 7 members. And the 7 members represent different industries and development and labor. And I am proposing additional positions, an environmentalist, imagine that, and also an urban planner as seats that should be on the ZBA. And we should also be looking at term limits for ZBA members. Right now, there are no term limits. They're there for 3 years and they could just continue on forever. I had proposed many things, and luckily the mayor took a lot of them already and made it into an executive order. I was concerned about conflicts of interest, you know, that you could be working in the field in labor or as a owner, a developer, or whatever you are, you could be working in that field and also be voting on projects in that field, right? As an architect included at the ZBA. And I felt that this is ripe for conflict of interest. And so there's a certain distance and now cooling off period we require. So if you've been on the ZBA, you got to take a little time before you can get back to your industry. If you've been in the industry, you've got a little more time before you get on the ZBA. We also require financial disclosures of the ZBA members. And what I'm really most proud about that the executive order adopted is the requirement that we have to disclose who you are if you're going to be buying and developing in Boston. Right now, it's very easy for me, Lydia Edwards, to get an LLC, and it's LLC John Doe who's purchasing and so on and so forth. And I get my lawyer to go to the ZBA and represent my LLC. I don't ever have to appear. You don't know who I am. We're requiring now for the first time that you say who you are. What are your ownership interests? Who is buying up in Boston? And I think that's very important. These things I'm excited to see. We're also making it really, I think, modern in terms of, for the first time, they're going to be able to file their plans online for the ZBA, and the people, us, would be able to find the project online, click on a link and see the plans as they are, see where they are in the process, see if it's been deferred, see why it's been deferred, sign up for email so you can get notifications if it's going to be deferred, if it's changed its date. These are all suggestions we had in the original ordinance that the the mayor took and made it part of the executive order. It makes the process transparent. And I think that's necessary because I have seen, and we have been as a community at the ZBA one too many times to find out after taking the time off of work, the matter's been deferred. And that's extremely frustrating for a lot of folks. And then just to touch on a couple things, I mean, I'm not unconscious of the world we're in right now and what we're dealing with police, with race, with a lot of different, I think, intense moments. And this is the time where I feel political leaders are called to lead. And, you know, where there's conflict, where there's strife, where there's concerns, I'm going to go to them. I'm not going to run away from them. And one of the examples of going to it instead of running away or avoiding it is we're now having our second talk on race in Charlestown. It's actually with the young kids from the housing development and the police. And the first one was very, very successful. We had folks from all generations, folks who grew up in busing, folks who opposed busing, folks who are still, you know, very, very, very firmly for police, folks who are very, very firmly critical of police, but we were all there. And to have an adult, well, a youth-led conversation, but like adults with respect and dignity for the fact that people may disagree. And I'm just proud of those kids, and I'm going to bring that up continually about how it's important to lead through open hearts and to have in this moment this consideration. I'm also introduced a ordinance with Michelle Wu to create an alternative to 911. This is for a mental health crisis. This is for family moments, not non-violent, non-criminal moments where not so much a social worker, but someone trained in de-escalation who is unarmed is able to come in. It's a call, an alternative call that some people would like to be able to make rather than calling the police. You have the option always to call the police, but some people would want to have a different alternative. I do want to thank Counselor, sorry, I didn't mean to demote you, Senator. I want to thank Senator Boncory for his partnership on the Homes Act. This is this is an act where we're trying to do eviction sealing to save a lot of people from the scarlet letter of being evicted in their lives. About 1 million people before COVID have an eviction record in Massachusetts, and I have no idea how many people are going to have it after this pandemic. We don't believe you should be scarred for life or judged based on a moment in your life where you didn't usually have the money to pay rent. I'm going to stop there and answer any questions folks may have or concerns. I just have to say right now, this job is by far one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Honestly, I think about what I would be doing in this time, and I'd probably be going nuts thinking about all the things I want to be doing and fighting for and being with. And what I have found with the communities I represent, especially the North End, I always have a partner. I have someone I can call, and I have people who are passionate, deeply passionate about their community. And I just have to thank you all, not only for coming to these meetings, but for being there as a partner for me. And call me even when you disagree. I'm telling you I grow, and I'm telling you I adjust my policies. I want to be listening even when we disagree. I think that's the best thing that we could do.
Thank you, Lydia. That was great. We do have some questions. 2 questions pertaining to outdoor dining. How has the space been allocated? I think outdoor dining is great, but some restaurants seem to have a lot of space while others are minimal. In my section closest to the garden, the space does not match the demand.
So in terms of the allocation of the space, my understanding is the city basically said yes to whomever applied for it. Now, how it was implemented, that might be a little different. You know, someone walked away with, I got permission to have X amount of seats. Now, maybe they went over those seats, or they used bigger benches than expected. I do know that the city had to have kind of an emergency meeting, as you will recall, pulling people in to say, you know, guys, we need to kind of reel it in a little bit and get some kind of control. But I think honestly, it's going to be a decent amount of growing pains for a little bit. Like, remember, we rushed this kind of out to save the industry, right? To save restaurants. So I think we still have some growing pains, but I'm happy to look if you feel that there's some inequities or that it's just not matching. Happy to look if you want to send directly to Michael Benetti the address that you're talking about.
Okay, and you can also reach out to John Romano, because I think he has a direct line to the licensing board, and I was on that call in the beginning, and I know they've spoken at other community meetings, and they said to let them know if you see something that doesn't look like it makes sense. The other question about outdoor dining, has there been a lot of visitors from outside of the Massachusetts? Has there been any discussion about adding mask required zones that cover the limits of the North End, or at least the big commercial areas, similar to what town centers and other tourist centers on the Cape and the islands are doing?
I have not heard about any specific mask zones for outside. Certainly inside, that's where most people are keeping the mask on, except until you're seated to eat. And that's where I found consistently, when you sit down to eat, most restaurants and most places let you eat without your mask, at least while you're seated. So I can look into that if that's a real concern about having, you know, if you're walking around, but technically you're supposed to have the mask on while you're walking around in between the restaurants and the stores. So.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Can
no.
because while we're on the mask topic, I just want to jump in and ask a question I received through email. So it's kind of how to get people to wear masks, or more people to wear a mask and abide by using the mask. I guess like this is something that I'm interested in, or see that I've gotten requests about, is maybe just posting or adding additional signage at like some of the major entryways to the North End, especially for people visiting, especially almost making it requested for people to be wearing masks while in the neighborhood, while visiting in town or out of town, to dine at the North End.
No, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I'm happy to look at some sort of signage that we should have up there. I think in general, the goal, we've always had this kind of issue with the folks forgetting that this is a neighborhood. It was a neighborhood before it was a tourist attraction, right? And then and that had to do with after.
Oh, Lydia, you just muted yourself.
Sorry, that was my phone. So people calling or coming into before and after concerts and whatnot, and people forgetting you're walking in someone's backyard. My child goes to school across the street. My mother or my grandmother is over in the senior home. So I think a lot of reminders like welcome to our neighborhood, welcome to, you know, where children play here, please keep your masks on, things like that, that we could in a nice way just remind people this is a beautiful neighborhood first.
We have a question. Is there an update on K-Bear's plan to fly seaplanes from Long Wharf into New York City?
I have not actually been in contact with Cape Air in this time with the pandemic. I want to absolutely speak with them about this. I'm really genuinely concerned about how this is being implemented and the frequency. And honestly, there's been some pushback, honestly, from some folks about having it be implemented. So I haven't heard directly from them. I need to be speaking, obviously, with Joe and with Aaron especially, and Massport about how this is going to be implemented.
Okay, next question. I've heard lots of complaints about compromised transparency and public input in recent virtual meetings of the ZBA and the BPDA. Have you heard these complaints, and how can we push for improved public process? What role does the council have in responding to the calls for racial equality in city governance?
Okay, that's like several questions, and
Yes.
that's okay.
All from one person. I read it right direct.
That's fine. Okay, in terms of transparency and concerns about the ZBA, BPDA process, that is a concern because we're trying to adjust how we meet at the same time while meeting. It's like trying to build a bike and ride it at the same time. They've not done this before on Zoom. They've not had this kind of interaction before. So there were some, in my understanding, some genuine technical just mistakes that they made. In terms of their transparency and their ability to get out there to the community, I actually think if they maximize this platform, they could be the most transparent they've ever been. One, because it's being recorded and because it's out there live, people can watch this after the fact. Two, you can actually channel into 3 or 4 different languages, and for the first time, people can be hearing what's going on in their neighborhood in their native language if they do not speak English. And 3, again, this has a lot to do with the proposed amendment that I have. I want records on the variances that they're giving out by neighborhood. I want to know why you voted for something. I want to know what the variance reasons were for. And these are things we're negotiating now. And some of them are in the executive order that already passed. We absolutely need full transparency and records of what's going on. And those are things we're still working on, to be quite honest. And in terms of, and I'm happy to keep everyone up to date as we, in our newsletter and so on and so forth with Michael Benetti, everything about how we're making this, the community more transparent. In terms of racial equity and concerns, Mayor Walsh initially had an executive order, I think, on racial equity at the beginning of the year. From that, the city councilors and me and I think about 8 of us total signed on to a letter with a list of demands, if you will, for the administration about how to make this a more equitable city. And making sure that we actually broke down and looked at all aspects, how we house people, how we deal with mental health, how we deal with our schools and funding, and all of these different things. And I could find that letter and produce that. But most importantly, the best way in which I think this class of city councilors is dealing with race and inequality is having real conversations and talking about it in a way that I don't think any other city council class has done before. I think we are challenging and pushing and moving and maybe causing more headache than some people would like, but that's, we're in the time and we're in the moment to deal with that. And I think we would be a derelict of our duties if we didn't have those conversations like I'm doing in my district. And like I'm willing to do anywhere in the district too. If the North End wants to do its own series, I'm happy to talk and get to know and learn and to build the bridges that I think we need.
Thank you.
I guess, so I have another question, just if this is kind of for you and John, if John or Michael wants to chime in too, but as far as the BPA restarting the process for the Harbor Garage project, and what's the status of that?
So yeah, essentially they've restarted it, and I think they've got to get the new proposal in. I still need to compare the difference. I am not yet convinced of it. I will say that. I've been cautiously waiting for the full process to happen. And that's where I think a lot of the criticism is rightfully laid on the administration, is about the process, is about how open it is, how transparent, and how clear they are in the standards they're holding developers to, if they are. And so at this point, I'm waiting for you guys, essentially. I'm not going to get ahead of my community that I represent. Okay.
And I know that that's, so it's something the North End would definitely have a say in this project. I mean, I know that it's technically Wharf District, but it's something that we definitely have a say in, and they would have to come before us and everything like that, correct?
They have to and should are 2 different things.
Yeah, it should.
Well, they actually were coming before NEWRA, before the pandemic hit, before COVID.
Oh, they did.
They were planning to, but we had to cancel.
Right, that's right. Yeah. So if they're going to come, like I said, I'm not going to get ahead of you. So I will be waiting to see how the process. I think that's a commitment I made in my first campaign. It would be community led.
Absolutely. We really appreciate that, Lydia. You've been super responsive to us and making sure that that the neighborhood has a voice and making sure that we have someone to reach out to and that it doesn't just fall on deaf ears, that it actually is being heard. So I just want to let you know that we really do sincerely appreciate all the work you're doing for us.
Well, thank you. And I have to, I'm going to have to thank my aide, Michael Bonetti. And I want to say, and John actually has been really great. I know he and Michael work exceptionally well together. So I have to say, thank you to both, honestly.
And both of their emails, Michael and John's, are in the chat. If you have any questions for the counselor or the mayor's office or anybody in the city, just please go right to them. They've been great getting back to us.
I was saying, can I just, Lydia, do time for one more question?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Just as far as like, just addressing like, I know during the pandemic, everything like that's going on, just the increase in homelessness, is there just like any plan to like tackle that from a city's perspective or anything?
Well, we were doing, I think, excellently during the pandemic in housing individual homeless folks. We had actually some colleges step up to their credit. I mean, I do get on them a lot about their pilot payments, but to, I think it was Suffolk's credit, they did put up some dorm rooms for some homeless folks. Now, how they're going to stay, we're not so sure. In terms of with the students coming back, how they're going to maintain that. I do know that there were a lot of, due to, I think she just signed on to Councilor Sabi George's efforts. Yeah, I see, she's just writing to everyone. Councilor Sabi George's exemplary efforts in helping with homeless families and making sure that there's a BPS program to get them vouchers. So there's been a lot of effort to help make sure that we get them early on in the pipeline before they're homeless and on the on our streets. I'm gonna be very frank with a lot of the folks who you see on the day-to-day basis. It's more than just lacking funds that we're dealing with. We're dealing with multiple issues, sometimes mental health, sometimes addiction issues as well. And again, I will speak to her incredible leadership. And Councilor Asabi George, I can kick it to her for the individuals at Suffolk, but there's been, yes, and I actually heard from some folks, the entry doorways of some of the shops here in the North End have become some places where people sleep. And I definitely actually will kick it back to the ordinance that I filed with Councilor Wu, and that is, the alternative to 911. Not all of those situations require a 911 call for emergency to come help this person. If there was an alternative number that could come in, a trained professional who is trained in de-escalation, could come with the police officer if need be, but who is trained and able to deal with a person dealing with these multiple issues at once, might be a great resource for us as a city.
Yeah, I don't know if your office has gotten any complaints on it, but I know also aside from doorways of restaurants, the behind the hockey rink, the skating rink right now particularly is becoming a hot zone just due to the construction between the bridge and Langone Park. It's just, I know that's a 301 complaint that it should be filed and everything like that, but I just wanted to just put that on your radar as well.
Absolutely, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And then I guess, do you want me to well, Councilor Sabi George, do you want to just let her speak to this issue while we're talking about this?
Hold on 1 second, I gotta unmute you.
My sister in service, Councilor Anissa Asabi George at large.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you for the introduction. I'll just quickly give you a couple of updates on some of our unhoused residents here in the city of Boston. First, if there is any individual who's sleeping in doorways or behind, feel free to email me and Lydia, and I'll make sure that we get services out to them. We'll get some pretty thorough services out to them. But at any point in time, you can call 311 and ask for the Pine Street outreach van, or call Pine Street in directly through their outreach services. They're open 24 hours a day. I put that number in the chat as well. There are several outreach vans that work the city and will come and offer resources, offer transportation to both the shelter or to the Pine Street Inn shelter or a number of other shelters. In regards to the Suffolk University dorms that have been utilized over the last couple of months, especially to decongest to sort of
Shelters.
lower the capacity of our regular city shelters. We've been using the dorms to house a few hundred homeless individuals. Pine Street Inn recently signed a long-term lease with a hotel in another part of the city to house, I think it's about 180 to 200 individuals, and they're almost all coming from the Suffolk dorms because students will be returning to campus the end of August, early September. So those are a couple of updates on those pieces. I've put some of my contact information into the chat box. Karen Foley, who usually covers this meeting for me, is on vacation this week, so I'm going to fill in for a little bit, but happy to be here and take any other questions. And again, my contact information's in the chat box. Thank you all.
Sorry, I had to unmute us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Counselor. So I don't see any more questions for Counselor Edwards or Counselor Sabi George. So I should say thank you both very much for popping in tonight and giving some updates and answering some questions for us. We really appreciate it. I'll now want to introduce Senator Joe Bonacori for some updates.
You're in.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, good evening, I'm sorry, everyone. It's great to see everyone and be with you all. This is the second time I spoke to the North End community since the break of COVID. I just want to thank Brett and Cheryl for joining these two groups and putting together these important meetings. It's important when your government is doing things that you stay informed. And you know, we're very lucky to represented at City Hall by, of course, Mayor Walsh, who was with us and who's been leading the charge for the city of Boston as it relates to COVID. But of course, our city councilor, Councilor Edwards, as well as Councilor Anissa Sabi George, who have been in lockstep every step of the way, ensuring that essential services are being delivered at the city during this COVID crisis. And, you know, they've taken tough votes. Votes that maybe they've taken some flack on, but I want to thank them personally for both voting on the budget and ensuring that city's essential services will continue to come, because it is a difficult time, you know, at the state fiscally. The state budget projects to be, you know, at a deficit of between $4 and $6 billion. So all the way down the list and down the line, we could see lack of resources coming down to our cities. So it's good that Boston is able to fill in where they need to and ensure that services are going to be delivered. You know, we're still waiting, and I'm sure Chairman Michaelwitz would speak to this, to see what the federal government is going to do to supplement, you know, kind of this COVID emergency fiscally. And, you know, that really remains unknown. So the state is continuing, you know, to work on its budget numbers. Typically, we would have had a budget probably by the, you know, end of May and into June. So the budget is really late this year because the fiscal outlook, you know, is really still very much unknown. On that note, I know Chairman Michaelwitz is voting. These are really what is known as like the last 2 weeks of formal sessions. So the Senate and the House are in alternatively on every night for the going forward for the next 2 weeks. And Aaron is voting on the police reform bill tonight. So I'm not sure he's going to be able to join us. I know they're in session and they're going to be in session pretty late. He plays a pretty, you know, integral role in every, in all the policy that comes out of the House of Representatives. So if he's not available, believe me, it's not for wanting to, it's not for want, it's because he needs to be doing what he's doing. But I want to go over some legislation that we've been working on since the COVID crisis has hit. We've been working for ways to identify and support the unique challenges that are faced by those in our communities, families, healthcare workers, restaurants in the North End and beyond, and small business owners and homeowners. We've passed legislation, which I spoke to all of you before, regarding expanding unemployment benefits. We established vote by mail in the Commonwealth during the COVID crisis. So many of you probably have received by now mail from the Secretary of State asking you whether or not you want to, you know, to mail-in vote. We want to ensure that everyone still has access to the ballot box and they don't have to put their health at risk in going and showing up on election day. I know those are due by the end of the month. So be mindful and turn those vote by mail applications around if that's how you so choose to vote. Voting will still happen in the typical way it happens throughout the city of Boston. Polling locations will be open in the normal course for those of you who do want to vote in person. Also, I want to mention there's been a lot of concerns from the North End about unemployment assistance claims. So whether that's PUA, which is pandemic unemployment assistance, or regular unemployment assistance, if you have any concerns, have a claim, haven't received an answer, please be in touch with my office, and I will put my contact information in the chat. You can contact me directly or my aide, Luigi Natali, who can answer any of those questions that you may have regarding unemployment. I just want a couple pieces I want to touch on. I know it's been a long night already. The last week, the Senate and the House agreed to a cocktails to go bill. As we work towards economic recovery, we want to allow restaurants and bars to sell cocktails with their takeout delivery orders. So restaurants and bars, as we know, have taken a huge hit during this pandemic. There's probably about 60,000 restaurants in the state of Massachusetts. The MRI, the Massachusetts Restaurant Association, projects that about 75% of those restaurants will not be in business post-COVID. So with the state legislature, we're doing everything we can, understanding, especially in the North End, where restaurants and bars are so woven into the cultural and economic fabric of our communities, that we're able to support their path towards economic recovery. As had previously been mentioned by the mayor, last week, the Senate passed a transportation bond bill to invest, modernize, and reform the Commonwealth's transportation system. As chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, I had the pleasure to work to ensure that this bill represented the needs of the North End and the needs of the waterfront. Some of the key investments we made were in Blue Line electrification, also a $3.4 billion investment in connecting the Blue and Red lines. We had addressed congestion in a major way by investing $50 million into bottleneck reduction programs and requiring the Massachusetts Department of Transportation to take steps in reducing traffic congestion, as well as bringing TNC companies, your Ubers and your Lyfts, to the table and requiring them to provide more data so we can better manage how they go about, how they work, and interject themselves into our transportation system. Beyond that, I was able to secure about $10 million for local projects in and around the district and the city of Boston, including $3 million for the restructuring and remodeling of State Street around the Greenway. This bill also deals with tolling and some other expanded tolling issues. Of course, it has major investments into the MBTA and commuter rail systems, which have been a concern in the past and are a concern now. The MBTA has obviously lost a lot of its fares. The MBTA core system was down to about 9 to 11% ridership in the past month. So that means, 91 to 89% of the people weren't riding the T that typically do. So we've seen obviously a downturn in revenues from that source. So this transportation bond bill, and in a good economic climate to borrow money, will make investments into our MBTA, our core system. Last week, the Senate passed a Reform, Shift, and Build Act, and this is a comprehensive bill designed to increase police accountability, to shift the role of law enforcement away from surveillance and punishment and towards de-escalation and assistance, and begin to dismantle systemic racism in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The legislation understands the high standards of conduct demonstrated by most of law enforcement in Massachusetts and the city of Boston, and really updates our laws to reflect this high standard. This bill deals with qualified immunity. It does not end qualified immunity, as has been reported elsewhere, but it clarifies it, it rebalances it, and ensures that there's a legal standard on it. The bill does limit qualified immunity defenses for officers whose conduct violates individual civil rights. Under the Senate bill, it will be made clear that nothing in this bill will impact or limit existing indemnification protections for police officers or other or other public officials. Other legislation we've been dealing with, obviously, as it relates to healthcare, ensuring our healthcare, our standards of care have changed for the pandemic situation we're in, as well as housing. We want to be able to make sure that during this pandemic, people can afford their rent and afford their mortgages. Everyone should be aware, but Governor Baker extended the moratorium on foreclosures and evictions through October 17th. So that does not, cancel anyone's, requirement or duty to pay rent or pay their mortgages, but it does extend the moratorium to that point. I try to wrap my point up, my part up quickly. I know some people may have questions, so I'm open to them.
We do have a question. Someone wants to know, they have not gotten their vote by mail card. Actually, I just got mine today, so perhaps they're all being mailed out. But if they don't receive one shortly, who do they contact?
If you don't receive one shortly, do contact my office. They have been rolling out since the beginning of the week in some precincts, like Precinct 3, that does have a substantial amount of Asian American voters, where they have biliterate ballots. Those ballots would be coming out late. So I think a precinct like Precinct 3 in Boston may get it on the tail end, but there's plenty of time to turn those ballot applications around. But if you don't have it by next week, please contact my office.
Thank you. Any other questions for Senator Boncory?
Senator Boncory, I just have some quick questions for you. So when we're talking about support from the federal government for funding, do you know like what kind of funding are you specifically looking for? Like what needs do we need to fill with federal funding?
So we have a tremendous amount of needs. So typically, in a COVID bailout bill that had been previously passed, the Commonwealth would be looking for unrestricted government aid. And the unrestricted part is, they'd send us the money and we would be unrestricted on how we spent that money, whether that money went to Health and Human Services, if it went to education, to fund something like the Student Opportunity Act that the state legislature put $1 billion into this year that's going to need some sort of stopgap. Or whether it's the regular delivery of municipal services and allowing that money to trickle down. Depending on what the federal government gives us, I think we will be able to fill a lot of the holes in our current budget structure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess this is the...
Any more questions?
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit more about the State Street funding and what it's for?
I can. The State Street funding is, State Street is obviously one of the oldest roads in Boston. And with that comes, the infrastructure around it begins to crumble. The city, working with Chris Osgood, with Councilor Edwards, we're able to identify in the bond bill that as a need. So that money, the $3 million, will go to infrastructure in and around the road, bike paths, bus lanes, as well as repaving and restructuring the road.
Another question for you. Could you repeat what you said about indemnifying the police?
Yes, so there's been a lot of concern in the Reform Build and Shift Act as to, as the standard for qualified immunity changes, what does that mean to police officers? Will police officers who are found to have, violated someone's civil rights have to pay out of pocket or, for lawsuits or any judgment rendered against them? And we did not deal with indemnification. So right now, a municipality, a state agency, has the duty to indemnify police officers for unlawful behavior, and we have not changed that. So although we changed this qualified immunity standard and rebalanced it, we did not change the indemnification laws. So a municipality or state agency would still have the duty to indemnify their police officers who are acting within the scope of their job.
Well, we just got noticed, Patrick just put up a note in chat. Representative Michaelwitz is not going to be able to make it this evening. He's on the floor. They are debating the police bill. So does anyone have any other questions?
If I could just ask a follow-up on
Yeah,
the police legislation. So I don't know, Senator Boncoy, I don't know if you've seen the House bill or really looked it over yet, but I want to know, like, what do you think the strongest parts of the Senate bill as opposed to the House bill? What are the strongest takeaways that you take away from the Senate bill?
On the Reform, Reshift, and Rebuild Act?
Yeah, for the police reform, yes, sir.
Yeah, for the police reform, I mean, I haven't seen the House bill in its entirety yet because they're not complete yet. That's why Aaron won't be here tonight. But essentially, the Senate bill establishes a post-act commission that will accredit and decredit police officers. It changes the use of force standards in the Commonwealth. So it, bans chokeholds. It limits no-knock warrants. It restricts the use of deadly force by a police officer. And it creates a duty to intervene by fellow police officers who are on the scene when something is going on. And it also increases the limits on police tactics around crowd control. Obviously, I've discussed at some length how it rebalances qualified immunity. So I think that's an important part. It's gotten a lot of press around it. And it also, reinvests funds into communities, that need it most. So since we've done criminal justice reform, we've seen less people in the Commonwealth be locked up. So this bill gives us the ability, if we continue to see less money needed for jails and prisons, to reallocate those funds towards community investment acts in the city of Boston and nonprofits that do, crisis response and so on and so forth.
Can we ask that?
I don't know that we can.
Yeah, no, we're gonna get that question. Yeah, I don't have any more questions from anyone. Let me just check email real quick.
Yeah, no, I don't see anything else either.
Is there anything else you want to speak to, Senator Boncourt, as far as like goals to get done by the end of second session and by the end of 2020?
I appreciate, I guess this is the benefit of going last. A lot of the questions have been answered by the preceding speakers. But there's a lot left on the table in the last week. We definitely want to get to some sort of economic development package in the legislature. We want to deal with, bills that are in front of us that have been in front of us for a while. I have a bill that bans female genital mutilation that I'm hoping to see come across the finish line. That the House actually did last week. And Ellen, I can tell you, there's a good chance the Senate takes it up next Thursday. I'm the primary sponsor of that bill. The Senate this week will take up a bill to reform the franchise laws in Massachusetts, dealing with local craft brewers and their beer distributors or malt beverage distributors. This is a very antiquated law that's been on the books that doesn't allow craft brewers to change distributors once they sign up with one. So with craft brewers as small businesses in and around our community, providing jobs and providing the like, we want to make sure they have every tool in their toolbox towards economic recovery. So it's another bill I sponsored to reform the franchise laws that the Senate will be taking up this week, on tomorrow actually. So we're also doing some work on outdoor dining and allowing the ABC to seize control to municipalities in making those decisions during the pandemic times.
That's it. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we're off mute. Anything else? I think we're good.
That's it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Senator Boncourt. Really appreciate it.
Let's see. I'm just seeing if he responds to this or not.
You know, I would just add that my contact is in the chat. Also, I have a bulletin that goes out that's every 2 weeks. So if you want to receive that bulletin, please just shoot me an email saying the same, and I'll make sure you get on the list.
Okay, perfect.
Let's make sure there's nothing
Yeah, we're
else.
just trying to confirm that if they're done on
Yeah.
for the House tonight. But I just, Councilor Sabi George, I just want to just say thank you for popping into tonight's meeting over here. I mean, Cheryl and I would very much look forward to having you attend our next meeting if we were to get another joint meeting together with our electeds, and have you all come back and give some updates from what's going on in your offices and what legislation you have going forward.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, everybody have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye.